Maya and her older brother Ethan had grown up sharing everything. They shared toys as kids, secrets as teenagers, and dreams as young adults. Their bond was the kind that made other siblings jealous. They could finish each other's sentences and knew exactly when the other needed support. But life has a way of testing even the strongest relationships, and theirs was about to face its biggest challenge yet. It started on a regular Tuesday morning when Maya received the call that changed everything. Their father had collapsed at home. The stroke wasn't massive, but it was serious enough to change their lives forever. Their mother had passed away from cancer 5 years earlier, so now it was just the two of them to take care of their dad. The hospital room felt cold and sterile as they sat beside his bed, watching machines beep and monitors flash numbers they didn't fully understand. The doctor explained that their father would need constant care. He could recover some functions, but he would never be completely independent again. Someone would need to help him with daily tasks, manage his medications, take him to therapy sessions, and be there during the difficult nights. Maya and Ethan looked at each other, and in that moment, they both knew their lives were about to change dramatically. Ethan lived 2 states away with his wife and 2 young children. His job required him to travel frequently, and uprooting his entire family wasn't realistic. Maya was single, worked remotely as a graphic designer, and lived in a small apartment across town from their childhood home. The decision seemed obvious, even though neither of them said it out loud at first. Maya would move back into their father's house and become his primary caregiver. Ethan would handle the financial side of things, paying for medications, medical equipment, and whatever else was needed. They shook hands on it like a business deal, trying to convince themselves this arrangement would work perfectly. Maya gave up her apartment lease and packed her life into boxes. She moved back into her old bedroom, the one with faded posters still stuck to the walls and a closet full of high school memories. The first few weeks felt strange, but manageable. She set up her laptop in the dining room to work during the day while keeping an eye on her father. She learned to prepare his medications, help him with physical therapy exercises, and adjust to waking up multiple times each night. Ethan called every evening at 7 o'clock sharp. He would ask about their father's progress, discuss medical bills, and try to offer encouragement. Maya appreciated it at first. She felt like they were a team, working together despite the distance. But as days turned into weeks, something began to shift. The reality of caregiving was nothing like she had imagined. It wasn't just about helping someone take their medicine or preparing meals. It was about watching a strong man who once carried her on his shoulders struggle to remember her name. It was about cleaning up accidents at 3 in the morning and pretending everything was fine. It was about giving up her social life, her routines, and her sense of freedom. When Ethan visited for the first time after a month, Maya had hoped to feel relief. Finally, someone to share the burden, even if just for a weekend. But instead, she felt anger bubbling up inside her. Ethan walked through the door with gifts and smiles, playing the hero who swooped in for a brief visit. He spent Saturday afternoon watching a game with their father, while Maya prepared meals and organized medications. On Sunday morning, they had their first real argument. It started over something small. Ethan suggested switching their father's pain medication to a cheaper alternative to save money. Maya, exhausted from another sleepless night, snapped at him. She told him he had no idea what their father actually needed because he wasn't there day after day, watching him suffer. Ethan defended himself, saying someone had to think about the financial reality. The medical bills were piling up, and they needed to be smart about expenses. His words made sense logically, but to Maya, they felt like an insult. How dare he reduce their father's care to a budget spreadsheet? They argued in the kitchen, their voices rising with each exchange. Their father was upstairs resting, unaware of the tension building between his children. Maya accused Ethan of taking the easy way out, writing checks while she sacrificed everything. Ethan fired back that she didn't understand the pressure he felt supporting 2 households and worrying constantly from afar. The conversation grew heated. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. And finally, Maya had enough. She walked away from the kitchen, climbed the stairs, and went into her father's room to check on him. He was sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. She adjusted his blanket and sat in the chair beside his bed for a moment, trying to calm her racing heart. Then she stood up, stepped out of the room, and quietly closed the door behind her. The soft click of the latch felt louder than it actually was. In that simple gesture, something fundamental changed between Maya and Ethan. The door closing was more than just wood meeting frame. It was a barrier going up, a distance being created, a relationship beginning to crack. The weeks following that argument felt different. Maya noticed it in small ways at first. When Ethan called during his usual 7 o'clock check-ins, she kept her answers short and factual. How was Dad doing? His blood pressure was stable. Did he eat well? Yes, 3 meals. Any doctor appointments coming up? Thursday at 2. The conversations that used to last 30 minutes now ended in 5. There was no warmth, no sharing of small details, no asking about each other's lives beyond the immediate situation with their father. Maya started keeping a detailed notebook. Every single thing she did went into that book. She wrote down every pill given, every meal prepared, every therapy session completed, every difficult moment handled. Part of her knew she was building evidence, though she wouldn't admit it to herself. Deep down, she wanted proof of her sacrifice, documentation of everything Ethan was missing. The notebook became her silent witness to the inequality of their arrangement. Ethan sensed the coldness but didn't know how to address it. He thought maybe Maya was just tired and stressed, which made sense given her situation. He decided the best way to help was to send more money. He increased his monthly contributions, paid for a better physical therapist, and bought their father a more comfortable medical bed. Each check he wrote felt like a peace offering, a way of saying he cared even though he couldn't be there physically. But Maya didn't see it that way. To her, the money felt like a substitution, as if Ethan believed dollars could replace his presence. When Ethan suggested hiring a part-time nurse to give Maya some breaks during the week, she took it as a direct criticism. Her voice went cold on the phone. Did he think she wasn't capable of handling things? Was he suggesting she needed help because she was failing? Ethan tried to explain that wasn't his intention at all. He just wanted her to have time for herself, to not carry the entire burden alone. But his words came out wrong, sounding more like he was fixing a problem than offering support. Maya told him she would think about it, then never brought it up again. The physical distance between them grew into an emotional canyon. Maya stopped sharing photos in their family group chat. Before, she would send pictures of their father's small victories, like standing with his walker or smiling at a joke. Those updates stopped. When Ethan's wife tried to video call so the kids could say hello to their grandfather, Maya often claimed it wasn't a good time. She had reasons that made sense. Dad was napping or not feeling well, but the pattern was clear. She was shutting them out. Their father noticed the change even in his diminished state. During his more alert moments, he would look around the room and ask Maya where Ethan was. The question always made her chest tighten. She would smile and say he was busy with work and his family, that he would visit soon. But inside, she struggled with the answer. Where was Ethan? He was living his normal life 2 states away, going to his office, attending his kids' school events, sleeping through the night in his own bed. He was everywhere except here, in this house, dealing with the daily reality of watching their father decline. Maya began to resent the sound of her phone ringing. Ethan's name on the screen triggered a mixture of anger and guilt. She wanted to scream at him, but also knew that wasn't entirely fair. He had responsibilities, a whole family depending on him, but knowing that logically didn't make her feelings go away. Every conversation felt like a performance where she had to pretend everything was manageable while he got to maintain his comfortable distance. The closed door became her symbol of separation. When Ethan called, Maya would often retreat to her room and close the door before answering. She spoke in low tones, keeping the conversation contained, not letting it spill into the rest of the house. It was her way of controlling the space, of keeping Ethan confined to just a voice on the phone rather than a real presence in their father's care. She didn't realize she was building walls that would become harder and harder to break down. One evening, their father had a particularly bad night. He was confused and agitated, calling out for their mother who had been gone for years. Maya spent hours trying to comfort him, holding his hand and speaking softly until he finally calmed down and fell asleep. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and desperately needed someone to talk to. She picked up her phone and almost called Ethan. Her finger hovered over his name for a long moment. But then she remembered all the previous conversations that left her feeling more alone than before. She put the phone down and cried by herself instead. The distance between them had become so vast that even in her darkest moment, she couldn't reach across it. 6 months into the caregiving arrangement, Maya had settled into a routine that felt more like survival than living. She woke up at 6 every morning to help her father with his morning routine, worked on her design projects in stolen moments throughout the day, prepared meals, managed medications, and fell into bed exhausted every night. Her friends had stopped calling after too many canceled plans. Her life had shrunk to the size of one house, one responsibility, one endless cycle of care. Then everything shifted on a Wednesday night at 2 in the morning. Maya woke to a strange sound coming from her father's room. She rushed in to find him struggling to breathe, his face contorted in pain. She called the ambulance with shaking hands, her voice barely steady as she gave the address. The paramedics arrived within minutes and worked quickly, loading her father onto a stretcher while explaining he was having another stroke. This one was more serious than the first. Maya rode in the ambulance, holding her father's hand while watching the paramedics work. The hospital lights were blindingly bright when they arrived. Doctors and nurses surrounded them immediately, asking questions she struggled to answer. They wheeled her father into the emergency room, and suddenly, Maya was alone in a waiting area filled with plastic chairs and outdated magazines. Her hands were still shaking when she pulled out her phone and dialed Ethan's number. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, his voice thick with sleep. Maya's words tumbled out in a rush. Dad collapsed. Another stroke. Hospital. Intensive care unit. Doctors don't know yet. She heard the change in Ethan's voice as he woke fully, heard him tell his wife something in the background, heard the rustle of movement. He said he would catch the first available flight and be there as soon as possible. Maya ended the call and sat down in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs, suddenly feeling more alone than she had in months. The next 12 hours passed in a blur. Doctors came and went with updates that said a lot without really saying anything. Her father was stable but critical. They were running tests. His condition was serious. They would know more soon. Maya called Ethan twice for updates, and each time he assured her he was coming. He was at the airport. He was boarding now. He would be there soon. When he finally walked into the hospital waiting room, Maya felt a confusing mix of relief and resentment. He looked worried and tired, his shirt wrinkled from travel, his hair messy. He tried to hug her, but she stepped back slightly and he noticed. They sat together in that waiting room, so physically close their shoulders almost touched, yet the emotional distance between them felt enormous. When a doctor finally came to speak with them, they both stood up quickly. The news wasn't good. Their father's condition was very serious. He was unconscious and on life support. The next 24 hours would be critical, and they needed to start discussing options and wishes for his care going forward. That word, options, felt heavy. The doctor led them to a private consultation room and explained the situation carefully. They needed to decide about aggressive treatment versus comfort care. They needed to discuss their father's quality of life and what he would have wanted. The doctor spoke gently but directly, and when he left them alone to think, Maya and Ethan faced each other across a small table. Maya spoke first, her voice firm. She wanted the doctors to do everything possible, every treatment, every option, every chance for recovery. Their father was a fighter, and he deserved every opportunity to fight. Ethan listened, then slowly shook his head. He thought they needed to consider what their father would actually want. Would he want to live connected to machines? Would he want to suffer through painful treatments that might not work? Wasn't there a point where letting go was the kinder choice? Maya's face flushed with anger. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. How dare Ethan talk about giving up? He hadn't been there for the past 6 months. He hadn't seen their father's small improvements and victories. He hadn't held his hand during the hard nights or celebrated the good days. And now he wanted to make decisions about ending treatment? Her voice rose despite being in a hospital. She told him he didn't get to make this call. He hadn't earned that right. Ethan's response was equally heated. Did Maya think he wanted this? Did she think he enjoyed being far away? He had a wife and children who needed him. He had a job that supported 2 households now. He couldn't just abandon everything, much as he might want to. And his absence didn't mean he loved their father any less, or that his opinion mattered less. This wasn't about who had been there more. This was about what was best for their father. Their voices echoed in the small room. A nurse passing by knocked gently and reminded them to keep it down. The interruption made them both stop and realize how out of control things had gotten. They stared at each other, breathing hard, years of unspoken resentment hanging between them. Finally, Ethan stood up and said they needed to really talk, not just argue. Maya nodded stiffly. Ethan walked to the door and closed it firmly. Once again, that gesture of a closing door, but this time they were locked in together rather than separated. This time there would be no escape from the conversation they should have had months ago. The room felt smaller with the door closed. Maya and Ethan sat across from each other at that small table, and for a long moment, neither spoke. The sounds of the hospital filtered through the walls, muffled voices, beeping machines, footsteps in hallways, but inside their small space, there was only silence. Finally, Maya broke. The tears she had been holding back for months started flowing, and once they started, she couldn't stop them. She told him everything. She talked about the loneliness of caregiving, how nobody understood what it was really like until they lived it. She described waking up in the middle of the night to check if her father was still breathing. She explained how she had given up her social life, her routines, her sense of identity beyond being a caregiver. She admitted that she resented him deeply for getting to maintain his normal life, while hers had been completely turned upside down. Every time he called from his comfortable home, she felt angry. Every time he sent money, she felt like he was trying to buy his way out of guilt. She knew it wasn't entirely fair, but feelings weren't always fair. Maya confessed that she had been pushing him away on purpose. It hurt too much to stay close to him when he represented everything she had lost. His phone calls reminded her that somewhere out there, people were living normal lives with normal problems. When he talked about his kids' activities or work stress, she felt bitter because those seemed like small concerns compared to what she was dealing with. So she had built walls, closed doors, created distance because being angry felt easier than being vulnerable. Ethan listened without interrupting, and when Maya finally stopped talking, exhausted from her confession, he wiped his own eyes. His turn, to be honest. He told her about the guilt that ate at him every single day. He lay awake at night thinking about their father, about Maya, about how he was failing them both. Every business meeting felt trivial. Every family dinner felt wrong because their father wasn't there and Maya was alone. He sent money because he didn't know what else to do from 2 states away. It was his way of contributing, of feeling like he was helping somehow, even though deep down he knew money couldn't replace presence. He admitted that coming to visit was sometimes harder than staying away. Seeing their father's decline, seeing Maya's exhaustion, and then having to leave again after just a weekend broke his heart every time. He felt like a fake, playing the concerned son for 48 hours before returning to his comfortable life. His wife kept telling him he was doing his best, but his best felt inadequate. He had been avoiding Maya's calls sometimes, because hearing her voice made the guilt worse. He knew she was angry with him, and he felt he deserved that anger. Ethan confessed he had been considering taking a leave from work for months, but was afraid to suggest it. Afraid Maya would reject the offer out of pride. Afraid his wife would be upset about the financial impact. Afraid of disrupting his kids' lives. He had been paralyzed by fear and guilt, so he did nothing except send checks and make brief calls. When Maya's coldness increased, he told himself she needed space, but really he was just relieved to have an excuse to keep his distance. He was ashamed of that relief. They both cried together, really cried, for the first time since their mother's funeral. The closed door that had symbolized their separation now created a safe space for complete honesty. All the resentment, guilt, pain, and love they felt came pouring out. They realized they had both been so focused on their own struggles that they hadn't really seen each other's pain. Maya hadn't understood how much Ethan's guilt was destroying him. Ethan hadn't grasped how isolated and abandoned Maya felt. They had been fighting the same battle on different fronts, each feeling alone in their struggle. When the tears finally stopped, they talked practically. Ethan would take an immediate leave of absence from work. He would stay as long as needed, whether that was weeks or months. They would rotate caregiving responsibilities so nobody carried everything alone. Maya would teach him everything about their father's care, and they would make all future decisions together. Most importantly, they promised to communicate honestly. No more building walls, no more closed doors between them, no more assuming the other person understood what was left unsaid. They also made peace with the hardest truth. Their father was dying. Whether it happened now or in a few months, that was the reality. They needed to focus on making his remaining time as comfortable and dignified as possible, surrounded by both of his children together rather than separated by distance and resentment. They would face whatever came next as a team, the way they should have been all along. When they finally left that consultation room, they held hands like they used to as kids. The door opened to a different relationship than the one they had entered with. Their father regained consciousness 3 days later. It was unexpected but welcome. The doctors were cautiously optimistic but made it clear that recovery was unlikely. They recommended hospice care, making him comfortable rather than pursuing aggressive treatment. Maya and Ethan, now united in their approach, agreed together. They brought their father home with hospice support and transformed the downstairs living room into a peaceful space where he could be part of family life. Ethan kept his promise. He brought his wife and 2 children to stay at the house. The change was immediate and profound. Suddenly, the quiet, heavy house filled with the sounds of life again. His kids, aged 7 and 9, brought an energy that had been missing. They did their homework at the dining table, played games in the yard, and spent time sitting with their grandfather, telling him stories about school. Their father, though weak and unable to speak much, smiled more in those first few days than he had in months. Maya and Ethan developed a rhythm that worked. They took turns with nighttime care, alternating who slept in the room next to their father. They shared meal preparation, medical management, and the emotional labor of caregiving. When one felt overwhelmed, the other stepped in without being asked. They learned to read each other again, the way they had when they were younger, understanding what the other needed without words. The open-door policy became their new symbol. Bedroom doors stayed open during the day. The door to their father's room remained ajar so he could hear family sounds and feel connected. The front door welcomed other relatives and friends who came to visit and say goodbye. The openness was intentional and healing. Every open door represented trust, connection, and the commitment they had made to face this together. There were still hard moments. Their father had bad days where the pain was difficult to manage. There were nights when both Maya and Ethan sat by his bedside, holding his hands, wishing they could do more. There were conversations with hospice nurses about what to expect in the final days. But they faced everything together, supporting each other through each difficult moment. One evening, about 3 weeks after their father came home, the whole family gathered in the living room. Ethan's kids were showing their grandfather drawings they had made at school. Maya was preparing dinner while Ethan helped their father sit up more comfortably. The scene was so ordinary and yet so precious. Their father looked around at everyone, his eyes clear for a moment, and smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a slight upturn of his lips, but it was enough. He was at peace, surrounded by the people he loved, and his children were finally working together instead of apart. Their father passed away peacefully one morning in early autumn. The leaves outside were just beginning to change colors. Both Maya and Ethan were with him, one on each side of his bed, each holding one of his hands. He slipped away quietly during sleep. No struggle, no pain, just a gentle letting go. They sat with him for a long time after, not wanting to rush the moment, grateful they had been together at the end. The weeks that followed were filled with the necessary tasks of death, making funeral arrangements, notifying people, sorting through belongings, handling paperwork. Maya and Ethan divided the work equally and made decisions together. When they disagreed on small things, they talked it through respectfully. The walls that had existed between them were gone, replaced by a deeper understanding and appreciation for each other. On Maya's last day in the house before moving to her new apartment, Ethan came to help her pack the final boxes. They worked mostly in comfortable silence, wrapping dishes, folding clothes, taping boxes shut. The house felt empty now, echoing with memories rather than current life. When the last box was loaded into Maya's car, they stood together at the front door. Maya paused and looked back into the empty house. She thought about that day 6 months ago when she had closed the door to their father's room in anger, when that gesture had marked the beginning of their separation. She turned to Ethan and mentioned it. He remembered too. Everything had changed after that moment, he agreed. Maya nodded slowly and said it had to happen that way. They couldn't have kept going on their original path. Sometimes things need to break before they can be properly fixed. They left the house together, leaving the front door unlocked for the new family who would move in the next day. As they stood by Maya's car saying goodbye, not permanently, but just for now, they both understood something important. Doors closing aren't always bad. Sometimes they force necessary conversations. Sometimes they create the pressure needed for change. What matters most is knowing when to close them, and more importantly, when to open them again. Their relationship was stronger now, built on honest communication and mutual support rather than assumptions and unspoken expectations. They had learned the hard way that love alone wasn't enough. You also needed presence, understanding, and the willingness to be vulnerable with each other. As Maya drove away and Ethan waved from the driveway, they both knew this wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning for their relationship, one where doors stayed open and love flowed freely between them.